As consumer expectations increase with the want for a first-class retail experience, the fueling industry will have to differentiate its offering in more ways than one. Dover Fueling Solutions set out to discover how to enhance the consumer experience in European fuel retail by surveying 1,200 customers across the UK, France, Germany and the Netherlands. This was to determine the expectations of today's consumers and the capabilities, products and solutions required to capture new customers while building loyalty with existing motorists. In this episode with DFS Sales Director Tatianna Wettbo, DFS Senior Sales and Business Development Manager Tim Firkins, and DFS Senior Product Specialist Elsemeike Laarman, we discuss how retailers can respond to changing consumer expectations and offer insight into what consumers value most when it comes to fuel retail. Thank you all for joining me today as we discuss the latest DFS report, Beyond the Pump, Enhancing the Consumer Experience in Fuel Retail. Although retail forecourts remain an essential part of daily life, consumer habits are changing and visits are often driven by necessity rather than routine. And time spent on site is typically brief. You yourself will know this once you are refueling or visiting on a road trip. The survey findings from a report underline this, with 75% of Dutch consumers and 71% of UK consumers visiting a fuel station at least once or twice a week or a few times a month, but they do so with a clear expectation of speed and efficiency. Tatiana, I'll come to you first. How can retailers provide reliable fueling for those who want to move on quickly while also delivering well-managed services for motorists who want to stay longer?
So I think there are, as we saw from our reports, some customers will spend less than 5 minutes, on the court. I think in Netherlands it's almost 20%, and then I think around 70% of the fuel consumers and customers will spend on a fuel station less than 15 minutes. So that means for the customers which want to move very quick, you need to have very fast payment options. It can be the outdoor payment terminals with contactless technology, or it can be usage of mobile application. And even if some customers would like to come in very fast into the shop, you could also provide them with a self-checkout option, so they can buy a coffee fast and also pay for coffee and for fuel really fast. Some retailers also for fueling define the zones, the traffic zones, and they can clearly mark some dispensers for the fast lane, so that means the customer is coming, paying for the fuel and moving away. That's in short what retailers can do.
Yeah, there's quite a few options there. And Tim, just coming to you, in terms of reliable fueling from a wet stock management and ATG point of view, is there anything that retailers can do to help enhance that reliable refueling?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always something that can be done. I think if we think about this sort of question regarding reliable fueling and the need to fuel as quickly as possible in some cases and get away as quickly as possible, things like remote monitoring of forecourt equipment uptime, for example, and not just uptime, but to ensure that the equipment that the consumer is using is in a fit state for that consumer to be able to use it as efficiently, reliably and quickly as possible. So, something like, for example, flow rates. If you've got a well-maintained flow rate on a fuel dispenser, it can be the difference between a refilling that takes 2 minutes and 5 minutes, for example. And that may not sound like a huge amount, but for the consumer, it's a huge amount. But second of all, if you've got a forecourt with a queue off the forecourt, if you take a supermarket forecourt here in the UK, for example, quite common to see queues off the forecourt. You need to get those consumers in and out as quickly as possible if they are aiming to just buy fuel and fuel alone. And that, I think, is, going back to some of the things Tatiana said, I think that's key is making sure that you're catering for those consumers that are just there to buy fuel, whilst at the same time catering for those who are there to buy more than just fuel. So those kind of payment options and technology options that Tatiana talked about, they really enable you to serve both of those customers and not to alienate one or the other. As a consumer, for me personally, there's nothing more irritating if all I want is fuel and I have to stand in a queue behind people paying for a basket of shopping. So, to think about, okay, well, I'm no more or less important than the customer with the basket of shopping, but we need to both feel like we're as important as each other. And the technology and the payment options that are in place on a station will help with that.
Yeah, of course. And then obviously, just coming back to what Tatianna had said, the survey also highlighted how digital habits reinforce these trends. So for example, 40% of UK and Dutch consumers used self-checkout options for quicker service, and then 75% of UK consumers preferred contactless payments. Elsemeike, how do these habits set the standard for fuel station service?
Yeah, it really defines what is actually a good service on a station. So digital habits have been evolving. Consumers have become used to speed, simplicity, control. They know that from other places where they have to pay. It's all. They expect the same experience there. So a quick, intuitive, secure payment system. It's new. It's a new baseline. It's not just a nice to have anymore, but it's really a need. If a customer cannot pay easily, it's, of course, that friction becomes a memorable experience in a way that you want to avoid. So at the same time as that risk of having a friction in that payment, digitalization also gives an opportunity to go further, connecting payments, loyalty, personalized offers in just one journey for the customer.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really valuable insight in terms of the expectations of other retail experiences are starting to creep on to fuel sites, and that's setting the bar, like you were saying, the baseline, Elsemeike, for what motorists are expected when they are refueling or coming into the C-store. Tatianna, can you add to that at all in terms of why this investment in digital technology for the C-store as well as the forecourt is so important for fuel station success and longevity?
Yeah, so because as we said, so customers today, and we have new generations coming into also fuel segment, so fueling the cars, they are expecting certain payment means. They are expecting to repeat the same behavior as in a normal shop. So I think the fuel retailers today need to offer similar options and similar experience to attract this new segment. Of course, in order to do that, Elsemeike already mentioned that, because today we can do much more with a connected or digital forecourt. So I think loyalty is very, very important, and you can link to their loyalty. You can use the data from all the payments, the fuels, the habits, to make the experience of your customers more attractive. And as Elsemeike said, if you're coming into a forecourt and you cannot pay, with your Apple Watch, which is a contactless payment, and maybe you don't have a card with you and things like that, then it means that most likely that person will reconsider if he or she will come back to that specific site. So I think our retailers today in many different European countries are making sure that their infrastructure can reflect this customer behavior which is evolving. Mm-hmm. And making sure that they can not only meet the customer behavior of today, but also of tomorrow. Because probably today, besides fueling, if you want to attract also your customers in the shop, you have to also create a good experience in the shop. Yeah. Maybe provide additional service like car wash, or picking up the parcels. Mm-hmm. Or picking up some specific food, and so on and so forth. So I think the preparation of a forecourt for new digital journeys, I think it's a very important step for our retailers to make sure that they not only play in the game today, but also they're ready for tomorrow.
Yeah, no, of course, and I think that kind of leads quite nicely into my next question in terms of payment convenience. We've touched on self-checkout, order kiosk, contactless payment. There are a whole host of different methods that consumers use today, and it very much varies across Europe, and we've seen that in the report. So why is it important, and Tim, I'll come to you first, for retailers to provide varying and secure payment methods on site and not just stick with one, for example?
Well, I think overall it's probably best summed up because that's what is expected. That's what a consumer expects. We've gone beyond. We're well beyond the days of forecourts competing with forecourts, right? Forecourts are C-stores that are competing with other C-stores now, as Tatianna just referenced, right? If I go into a standalone C-store without a forecourt and I can use certain methods of payment, I fully expect to be able to use the same thing on a forecourt. Personally, I don't travel with a wallet. Very, very rarely have a wallet with me with actual physical cards. So, if I was to go to a forecourt and I can't pay with contactless payment, then I'm going to be in trouble. I'm going to be on the non-payment list. So I think that variety of frictionless payments, and that would include mobile payments, contactless, etc. We all have our favourites, our preferred methods, and like you said earlier, that differs from country to country and from demographic to demographic within those countries. I think all in all, the overall sort of aim of everybody when it comes to our chosen form of payment is about reducing the pain, making it frictionless. And that, when it's a distressed purchase like fuel is, that's even more important. You don't mind a checkout process maybe taking a bit longer if you're buying something you really want, but not many people really want to spend €100 on a tank of fuel, right? And I think to that point, these are, if you think about the security element of it, generally speaking, if you're looking at fuel purchases, they're high value transactions, right? So there is high impact when it comes to payment errors, like maybe a duplicate transaction or something like that. There's high impact for some demographics when it comes to how a transaction is pre-authorized if you're paying at pump, say, and whether that those funds are reserved from your account. I've seen that in when I was working in payment in the past. Those high value transactions and the high impact of those transactions can have a real effect on the consumer. All of that adds up into this need for it to be as frictionless as possible, as reliable as possible, and for the consumer to know that they're going to be impacted by the process as little as possible.
Yeah, and I think it kind of ties back into brand perception and trust as well. Like if they have limited payment options or it's causing friction, to Elsemeike's point, it's going to deter future use of said fuel station, or it's going to make you concerned about the security of your payment information, for example. And I think moving forward, we're moving to a more digital era. Like you were saying, you don't really carry cards. A lot of people now don't carry cash, depending on the country that they're in. Therefore, you need to have those options, and you need to ensure that your customers trust that they are able to pay securely at whatever station that they're at. Just coming on to a different part of our survey, because it highlighted that price, location and cleanliness were considered some of the most important deciding factors, when choosing where to refuel. Elsemeike, with little ability to change much in relation to price or location, how can retailers prove their site is worth visiting out with those two deciding factors?
Yeah, I think that's all about the experience. If you pull up to a site and you see how easy it is to fuel, how clean, how safe the site feels, how easy it is or convenient to grab whatever you need on the site, that makes, I think, your basic stop a preferred destination, are getting the experience that you're looking for, then that is what retailer can stand out with apart from any location. If you feel safe, for sure, myself, if I would need to stop at a site late at night and I need to go outside of my car and there is not enough lighting there, I wouldn't go there the next time that I need to stop late at night. I don't know, but that gives you a better feeling of that site. So, and then of course cleanliness, efficiency, it all builds trust up. But then also so the site needs to be well managed, digitally connected. When that's it's a great coffee, a quick bite to eat, seamless payment. People remember that, and they will perhaps take a detour the next time they need to fuel.
I suppose it all comes down to like a series of really small touch points that build that bigger picture, doesn't it? Because I think a lot of fuel retailers have previously, to Tim's point, seen refueling as a distress purchase. Therefore, not a lot of time or effort has had to really go into a fuel station offering because someone would have to refuel at one point or another. However, consumer habits and their expectations are changing, as this report has shown. So, Tatianna, just coming to you, why do you think well-maintained facilities are seen as an important part of the overall service experience?
First of all, I think well-maintained facilities provide you as a consumer a feeling, if you see that the equipment is clean, you see the lights are turned during the evening, you see that, also dispenser, if you have a payment into dispenser, that everything looks fine, so there is probably no attempt to putting a skimming device, so these are all factors together that would give you just as a consumer a sign that yes, retailer takes care of this site, they care of me as a consumer, and it's a kind of brand face of that specific brand, how the site looks, and it's more about a perception and a feeling you give to your consumer, because I think again we are all people, consumers are all people, so it's also a bigger part of how you feel will of course reflect on your choice of a fuel brand site. And I think besides all the factors, we mentioned, price, location, cleanliness, I think also where the retailers can differentiate, it's around loyalty as well. And we talked about, personalized offers and so on. So I think that together, price, location, cleanliness, brand positioning, and loyalty gives something to consumer, a trust.
Yeah, I think if we were to compare it, you wouldn't choose a restaurant if a restaurant looked dirty. You would go somewhere else. And I think the same can sometimes be said about fuel stations. If you saw one that looked kind of run down or not clean, you're probably going to look to potentially go to the next one. And that also kind of goes hand in hand with some of the other data that was gathered. Essentially, when pumps or payment terminals are out of order, consumers are very quick to switch stations. I know, Tatianna, you just touched on loyalty there. However, if equipment is out of use or unavailable for whatever reason, the only option some people do have, depending on their time limits, is to go somewhere else. The survey confirmed this, as with 63% of French respondents said they wouldn't return if they visited a fuel site and equipment was out of use. That's a very high number of potential lost revenue and future loyalty opportunities. So
yeah, it's correct, Sarah, and I think just to add, because I think Tim mentioned a little bit, today with our products and solutions, we can monitor certain things on the sites, and we can prevent, stop of a fuel pump or, our outdoor payment going out of the paper. So we today, as a solution provider, can provide instruments to fuel retailer to monitor all these things and to prevent this situation to happen, to have a pump out of order or a payment terminal out of order. So, and minimize, of course, the cases where a customer comes and finds out a defective pump or defective payment terminal and so on.
I think that was it's a big thing, isn't it? Because a lot of retailers, and we've known this when we were launching RDM by DFS, that a lot of retailers don't know that a pump is out of service for a long period of time because it's not something that motorists often report. They just drive away or they move to another one. So it could be hours, if not a full day, before they realise that one of their pumps is not in service. So there are solutions out there that can prevent that essentially and allow retailers to become more proactive rather than reactive and kind of build on that service expectation from consumers. Just touching on that, Tim, how important is fuel site visibility above and below ground for a fuel site, and why is it so important to make that?
Yeah, so it is super important, as we've already touched on. If we have here survey results that say that 63% of consumers will walk away if there is faulty equipment, then that tells you how important it is, right, to have full visibility of of what's going on your site. And like you said, it's important that that visibility is both above and below ground. Some of the things that Tatiana's mentioned, what you were mentioning with RDM there, these are the things that the consumer sees. There may be arguably, took from the consumer's perspective, they're the more important things, right? The things that the customer touches and interacts with, like a dispenser, like in a self-service market. That would be flow rates, like I alluded to earlier. It would be things like nozzles out of use or payment terminals not working, etc., like Tatiana mentioned. And I think there's two elements also that go with that, which are, first of all, investing in quality equipment in the first place that has a better total cost of ownership and sort of long-term quality lifetime. Then remote monitoring, as we've talked about, proactive maintenance of that equipment is also super important. All of those things will add up to a reduction in that faulty equipment and an increase in uptime of the equipment. But that's when it comes to the above ground. That bit is perhaps easier to solve than below ground. Below ground, it's very, very difficult to understand what's going on, to understand what's the quality of my tanks and lines, etc. Am I losing fuel? And again, that comes down to remote monitoring really being at the heart of solving that problem. So remote monitoring of fuel that goes into the tanks, of fuel going through the pumps, etc. Not just looking for leaks below ground, but also looking for other anomalies like over dispensing meters, say meters in the dispensers that have maybe drifted beyond an acceptable tolerance, and that can have an impact. So it's really important to be able to have in place proactive monitoring of equipment above ground and equipment below ground, because there's so many different touch points there, so many different impacts, and if you don't have a control of those things, it will be out of control.
Yeah, I think that's something that we all want to avoid. We want to have control of our sites. We want to have true.
And one thing I would add with that, with both the above and below ground stuff, is it's also about not just having visibility, but having visibility that leads to action, right? So we always use the phrase actionable insights, and I think that applies here because the idea is that those actions need to drive improvement. So that visibility needs to drive improvements, and that really needs to be the goal in all of this. Whether you're remotely monitoring a payment terminal or remotely monitoring the fuel in a tank, ultimately the data you get from that and the visibility you get from that needs to drive action that is going to improve your operation.
Yeah, agree. And I think it's important to come back to something that Elsemeike said earlier in terms of that connectivity element. It's extremely valuable when we're talking about making sure that our equipment is responding to our consumers.
We are talking about the site ecosystem, yes? Mm-hmm. Of course, Prisma is in the middle of that, and Prisma has, I would say, 3 main modules or whatever. It's like a Prisma ecosystem where you have a connection to forecourt, a connection to C-store, and then, of course, connection to payment devices, and then payment devices have connections to different acquirers, loyalty programs, and whatever. So Prisma, it's correct that it's something in the middle which connects all the dots. Despite how the site might look, it can only be an unmanned site, or it can be a site with a big store and a restaurant, or you can have just a small store.
So fuel quality and choice also play a part in repeat visits from consumers, with 1/3 of them citing fuel quality as a deciding factor where choosing to refuel. How can retailers provide additional fuel grades at the dispenser?
So maybe I can take this. So today, I think a lot of customers are providing different type of fuels. Some are providing some special grades, high quality grades of fuels. We have, of course, the sites which we have today, and some of the retailers like to offer additional premium brands, but they have no space. They don't want to dig the ground. So from DFS side, what we have done, we have brought a new technology which is called additive technology, where we can actually provide to a retailer possibility to sell premium grade without adding a tank. So we do the additive injection in the pump. So instead of one grade, a retailer can provide to customers two grades, a premium grade and a normal grade. So that's additive technology has been used already for several years in several European markets and is available today.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great way for retailers who are looking to provide that additional fuel quality or fuel grades for the consumers who want it, while also not having to put out significant investment in underground.
Investment, exactly. So it reduces very much investment, yes.
Yes.
Digging, making sure, the tank is good, making additional lines and all this kind of things. So I think that is a very good option. And in some countries, as I say, I think Spain, I think is leading in additive technology in Europe today.
Yeah, and I think as well it's important to, we kind of touched on this earlier and it's been shown in the report that consumers don't like site downtime. So obviously having something where you don't have to do excessive underground digging would also reduce or minimise the downtime of said site, which means they can get back up and running as normal. Tim, just coming to you, is there a way for retailers to ensure the quality of their fuel for motorists who visit? Is that something that they can do via wet stock monitoring?
Yeah, it is to an extent, for sure. Yeah, with ATG, for example, you are able to monitor the density of fuel. That's an important element. With wet stock monitoring, that remote monitoring of, I would assume that most quality issues come with crossovers of the wrong fuel in the wrong tank, the wrong fuel being delivered but through the wrong nozzle, or maybe a mix of fuel. So wet stock management can identify crossovers. Using a proper replenishment planning system like our bottom line solution, for example, can reduce those errors in deliveries to site, as well as good maintenance of equipment and using quality equipment in the first place. I think it's an interesting one, this, because most consumers, let's face it, have no way of measuring the quality of the fuel that they're buying. So that tells me that a lot of this comes down to perception again, right? As we spoke about earlier. So, having the perception of a high quality site leads to perception of high quality fuel. Having those different options, branded fuels, whether that be sort of more standard branded super grades, premium grades, or whether it's additive grades, as Tatianna mentioned, or whether it's new greener options like HVO, which is another one that can be deployed without the need to change any site infrastructure. That creates a perception of a modern retailer that's thinking of the consumer, giving the consumer choices, etc., etc. The reality is that, like I say, the consumer doesn't actually know what level of quality they're getting. But absolutely, with remote monitoring in place, we can ensure that, to the extent possible, that the quality is as intended.
I agree, and I think it comes down to, you're talking about perception, it comes down to that perceived value, which Elsemeike, Tatianna and yourself touched on earlier as well. And the survey actually showed that consumers respond well when they feel that services are adding genuine value. So for example, we're talking about loyalty that Tatianna mentioned, we're talking about the different connectivity with payment and forecourt, and also in terms of the fuel grade options. So we've mentioned this in previous podcasts, and we've touched on this previously, but generic advertising or loyalty programs are not enough on their own. Elsemeike, how can forecourt and C-store technology support the broader consumer experience when they visit a fuel site?
Yeah, that's again about having that integrated solution out to really make the connection between what is going on outside at the forecourt and getting people perhaps inside to the C-store. We've seen, for instance, customer requests of really showing a message on the outdoor payment terminal, hey, happy birthday, please come in and grab a coffee, which is very unique, very personalized, and it creates an immediate bond with your customer, of course. It can also lead to upselling, of course, because you're going inside for that free coffee, and perhaps you want to have a snack, or you're going to have your lunch there. So it's really, technology is supporting the retailer in selling additional.
Can I just add to that? Just say I'm still not sure that as an industry that is being done to the extent, the best extent at the moment. I remember 13 years ago, I think it was, doing a sort of proof of concept project with a well-known retailer where we did exactly what we're talking about here, sort of personalization of the experience and personalization and that was about, for example, upselling of premium grades and that kind of stuff. And really, I don't feel like since that 13 years ago experience that really we've come on as far as we can here. So the technology's there, but I think we can do more innovative stuff with it.
No, I agree, and I think it can leave you with a positive experience and a lasting experience that you kind of remember fondly. Like to Elsemeike's point previously, it might make you want to return specifically to that site because of the experience that you get whilst there, level of personalization, although it might not be there yet across the continent, for example, and there are different variations of personalization. But to your point, I think it is important. And then, Tatianna, coming to you, is there anything that retailers can do or technology that they can invest in that will help support the change in consumer expectations?
I think the retailers have constantly to invest, to support whatever consumer trends are ongoing, or energy trends. So besides, let's say, taking care of the consumer and fuels, we have another trend which is quite big around green energy. So if consumer can diversify their focus by adding HVO, as Tim mentioned, or hydrogen, or LNG, or EV charger, so that's what also I think normal consumers will expect. And of course, again, whenever you are fueling or you are charging your car, you would expect, again, you expect as a consumer the same experience in payment, yes, the same experience in the shop. You should be able to combine the EV charging and a coffee and be able to pay it in the shop like you're doing for fuel today. So all these trends have to be considered by retailers, and of course how they can do it is just to get the architecture and think about a holistic approach where the whole ecosystem with different energy will connect to forecourt and central hub, and then will connect with the things we have today, their banks, loyalty system, supporting different card schemes and all these things. So I think the retailers which can today have the same experience for EV charging or fueling can gain a lot. And I think that behavior will more and more be prevalent by consumers, because in the same family you can have a fuel car and an EV car. I see this I think the digital readiness, yes, and diversification on the energy offering are probably two major trends where our retailers have to put a lot of focus today.
Yeah, no, I agree. One of the things that the survey and the report touches on is the Smart Mobility Hub, and I know that we done a series on that earlier on in the year where we touched on various topics relating to the Smart Mobility Hub. So one of the things that was identified was that while speed and accuracy remained extremely essential for consumers at a fuel site, the survey highlighted how new demands were centred on transparency, integrated payments, which we've touched on, and seamless access to sustainable fuels, which is something we've also briefly touched on. Well, in terms of the report and the results that we got from the data captured, what steps can retailers take today that would enable them to meet the consumer expectations of tomorrow? Tatianna, I know you kind of briefly touched on that, so I'll come back to you first.
Yeah, so as I said, I think the retailers have to focus on what segment they want to play, yes, because we have also EV retailers coming along, just like standalone retailers. I think consumers today can charge their cars at home, so I think fuel retailers have to provide on green fuels a very, very good service. On the C-stores and forecourt itself, so with DFS technology today, if of course retailers are using our technologies, we provide the support for restaurants, so you can manage the space or cafe in your fuel site and transform it into a restaurant with a table service. And with a menu, we have introduced recently pre-order kiosks in order to support a consumer behavior where customers are coming and they don't want to have so much interaction with the staff, and maybe there is not so much staff available at the station, so they can pre-order food. So we introduce pre-order kiosks and so on and so forth.
Yeah, no, I think there's a whole host of things we could touch on, isn't there? Elsemeike, coming to you, in your opinion, what steps can retailers take today that would help them meet changing consumer expectations?
Yeah, I think that's all about making your technology infrastructure flexible so that you can adapt quickly to evolving needs, and to having really a setup that allows for IT changes. And because the world is digital, you need to adapt quickly, and your whole infrastructure needs to be built for that. I think that's really where you have where retailers would need to invest in today.
Yeah, become more responsive. And then Tim,
I'm going to cheat with my answer by not really giving an answer, but just to say that what steps can retailers take? They need to take steps. That's the important thing. I see quite a lot of waiting at the moment in the industry. Yes, it's important to consider business strategy, technology strategy, etc. Really, really important to look at that strategy for the future. But it's important not to wait, right? We can't. It's no good being in a kind of limbo in the meantime. We need to invest for today as well as investing for the future. And I think really that just backs up what Elsemeike has just said in the sense of actually if you're investing in the right systems, the right architectures, something that's future-proofed, etc., then you can do that. You don't need to stand still in the meantime. You know, if you look, for example, give an example of what I mean by that is with our Prisma ecosystem, site systems ecosystem, you know, the ability to connect in via our DX Power solution to EV chargers that then connect into the site system seamlessly in the same way that you would connect a fuel dispenser. You know, that means that you can invest in a system now that in 5 years, 10 years time, regardless of which fuels you're offering, which energy types you're offering, you know, you can rest assured that you have a solution for the future. So that would be my message, would be don't wait, invest for today, and in investing for today, invest for the future at the same time.
Yeah, and maybe Sarah, as a closing to the team and Elsemeike and whatever has been, I also think that it's very important for fuel retailers to decide what they will do with the data, because today on the site system we are capturing a lot of data. And of course, one data can be used to attract customers, to retain those customers, and another set of data can also be done to analyze, how to operate better with Firkins, but also the decision around business, yes, the customers the retailer wants to attract, the customer groups, and of course, how can they use the data in order to boost the business.
Yeah. And I think it's a nice way, to end on data, because this survey that we're discussing on our podcast was generated from independent survey data across 4 European countries. And I think that something that was highlighted, and it was quite unique to us, was the similarities but also the differences across the 4 countries. And I think something for fuel retailers to be in mind is, yes, make the investment, but to Tatianna and Elsemeike's point, you have to know your customer groups. You have to pick an area or a certain division that you want to look at and invest in thoroughly based on your customer groups. And I think this report really gives some genuine insight into that. So thank you all for joining me today. And for anyone who is interested in reading our full report, you can do so by clicking the link, and it will take you straight through to that, and you can download it and let us know what you think. So thank you very much, and we hope you join us again in our next podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Pump, Enhancing the Consumer Experience in Fuel Retail. We hope you enjoyed this episode with Tatianna, Tim and Elsemeike. If you'd like to support the podcast, feel free to share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a review. To catch the latest from Dover Fuel & Solutions, you can follow us on LinkedIn or visit our website at www.doverfuelandsolutions.com. If you'd like to download the report, click the link in the episode description. Thanks again, and we'll see you next month where we continue to fuel the conversation.